Okay, so as we see, it asks us for this to be our output, and that is at least 7 lines. So we have here, let me get my drawing board. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. So we know that it's going to be at least 7 lines of print. So print this, print, print. And they want this to be our outputs. So it's, my bad. Okay, so we know that we have at least 7 lines. And then we know what our output should be if these are the numbers that we enter, 4 and 5. So we are given the first line. I don't really understand this specific part. I asked the teacher about it, so once I know, I will let you know. But so we're given the first line, right? And the first line, it's just gonna show this. It's gonna show enter integer. So it's showing this part of it. And then I believe this is the part where you're able to enter the integer. And so when you enter it, it's gonna print. So you want your next line to say print you need or you entered, because these are the words, right? So these are the words that it's gonna print, and then you want it to print the actual integer. So you type it in the form of a variable, meaning that you don't include these little quotations, because if you include the little quotes, it's gonna print a string, and you don't want it to print a string. So a string, it would literally print user num if you had the little quotes around it. So we don't want to do that. We just want to print it as a variable and add a comma there so that it knows that there will be a space and that it'll print that after. It's just, yeah. So then it's gonna print you entered and the user number. So this can change depending on what we enter, right? So if we enter 4, that's what it's gonna print. If we enter 7, that's what it's gonna print, depending on what we input as the input. And then the next line, we want it to say 4. So we wanted to say the user number. So print user number, comma, squared is, because it's up here, comma, user number times user number. So it wants us to do the multiplication formula. So we're multiplying the variable by itself, which would give us 16. So in this case, we're testing this with 4 and 5. But if we use other numbers, then we would have a different result. And then for the next line, we have it wants it to output and 4 cubed is 64 exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And again, that's if we're using 4 as our input. So what we want to do is print and a string user number, because remember this number can change, comma, cubed is, comma, user number times user number times user number, because it's cubed, right? So, and then comma, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. So whenever we write things in quotations, it's gonna literally print it like that. If it doesn't have quotations, then it's gonna print it as a variable. And then for our 5th line, so now we're in our 5th line, we want a second variable. So I decided to name this variable user number 2. So this is something that I chose myself to name that variable that. And the variable, we're asking for an input. The input, it's gonna read enter another, so it's gonna print enter another integer. And we know that that's gonna be an input. So that's why we put this in parentheses. We know that it's gonna print this, but we know that this print is gonna be an input. And we know that this input we need it to be an integer. So that's why we would put the int outside of it. And let me know if you want me to explain that. I was a little confused on that as to why that is and stuff. But basically, if we don't put it as an integer, it would think of it as a string, and you can't subtract a string from a variable. But if you want me to go further into that, let me know, because I don't mind explaining. I just want to make sure that it makes sense. So if at any point, if there's something that doesn't make sense, let me know, and I'll go over it. So then in our line 6, we want it to print this, right? So what it's going to print is a variable, comma, quotations plus, comma. The second variable, which in this case it's 5 up here, is comma, and then we're going to add the variables together. So it should add up to 9, how it's here or here. And then for our last line, we wanted to print user number, comma, times, in quotations, because we wanted to literally print this. And so when we wanted to literally say that, we put it in quotation marks. And then comma, and then it's going to be the variable, our second variable. So that would be our second input, comma, is in quotations because we wanted to literally say that. And then comma, this is where we carry out the multiplication. So we multiply the variable 1 times the variable 2, and then it should give us a result of 20 if we, of course, are using 4 and 5 as our input. So let's say we change our input to, I don't know, 2 and 3. It'll give us a different number. So it's gonna, you enter 2, 2 squared is 4, and 2 cubed is 8, and then 2 plus 3 is 5, 2 times 3 is 6. So you notice how it's different from this one with the different inputs. So now we can try it with 4 and 5. With 4 and 5, it should give us the same one. It's just gonna, it's only gonna change the variables. Everything else, it's gonna be literally entered how it's written because we put it in a string. And so we can try it with 4 and 2, or 4 and, let's try it with 4 and 3. 4 and 3. We're gonna run our program, and then we're gonna get, again, what we entered in a string, it's going to be literal. You entered is in a string. The only thing that changes is the variable. 4 squared. You get the gist, right? So 7 and 3, it changes the variable only. Only the variables is what it's changing. 7 plus 3 is 10. 7 times 3 is 21. And so here you notice how here it's printing literally this, and then here is where it does the multiplication from this formula right here. Let me know if you understood this. I will copy and paste the formula for you, and just let me know if you understand it. I want to make sure that I explained it well.